Continuation of Chapter 8. Energy and Tension. Brotherhood and peace on earth are not good for attainment. Strife and conflict are. Continue to bang your head against the wall. This prepares you to bang your head against bigger and bigger walls. If you need entertainment or escape, you are asleep. Richard Rose. Normally people try to use this area of betweenness to make things manifest for me. They don't take things to the next level to see how it could be used in our quest to know the self. And to understand this is to understand another force about betweenness, tension. If you place two equal magnets across from each other, at the exact midpoint between the two is a space where a piece of metal can indefinitely be suspended. It is the tension applied from both sides equally and simultaneously by the magnets that creates the powerful midpoint. It is this middle ground that Rose was referring to with betweenness. Tension is a main power of the spiritual path. One does not advance by learning how to be happier, but how to have more tension applied, at a level that is not unbearable, so we don't crack, and then using the energy of the middle to move one step up the ladder. Too much tension, and we will get ripped apart. Too little, and there's no energy in the gap. Tension can only come from some sort of polarity. One magnet produces no betweenness. It is good to note that in front of Egyptian temples were always mirrored obelisks and often paired sphinxes that one would walk between, as if the act of being between these power objects would do something to our body, mind, and consciousness. The consideration of any two opposites creates a third middle force, which may have nothing to do in relation to either. Enlightenment is the experience of nothingness and everything simultaneously. The uncompromisable point is the center between opposites leads to a dead stop, this tension creating the third force. Richard Rose. The use of betweenness in our spiritual path requires using tension, but not being tense. We must learn to live without the dream, yet at the same time to personally identify with it. We get to the midpoint between tension and no tension. To do this, we learn to live in the gap between everything, knowing and unknowing, longing and emptiness, life and death, hope and despair. This is not as easy as it sounds, as generally we are always egoically pulled to one of the two opposites, and thus lose our place in the middle. Some create aspects of no tension, with alcohol, songs, mantras, things that occupy the mind, and allows a gap of freedom for something else to happen. When we can get the mind to stop moving from one extreme to the other, we are left with something like the calm eye of a raging hurricane. This again may be the entire reason for religious and shamanic rituals, chanting, exercises, dancing, and whatnot, all to occupy the conscious mind, which allows a space for a deeper, non-ego place of power to be connected with. The problem is that one cannot focus too much on the songs or mantras, or there will be no gap, only control by the external ritual. Instead of taking one drink to be calm when asking the pretty girl out, we get drawn to take 8 and wind up embarrassing ourselves. We use our ritual or practice as a doorway, not for peace of mind, but instead to create a clear center point. An article by Bart Marshall, Ultimate Betweenness, reminds that there is an important aspect of working with our intent. By intent, we mean what the egoic mind is thinking and moving towards, and we want to have that part of it as clear as we possibly can to avoid double negatives. I don't want to feel bad automatically introduces feeling bad. Saying I want to feel well introduces the focused direction. Hypnotist Darren Brown showed that if he wants someone to forget their phone number, he asks them to try and remember your phone number. By using the word try, he indicates something we are doing but not completing, hence their mind goes blank. This subtle wordplay is going on continually. How often does a mother say to a child, "Don't fall out of the tree," and the child soon falls, for the idea "fall out of the tree" was entered into the child's mind instead of Stay safe while you play. It looks simple, but this use of words, internally and externally, seems to have a great effect on the reality we experience around us. The wording used to structure the intention is important. The desires of the universe, our egoic wants, and all the subconscious desires and fears intermingle into a giant soup and create the experience we are having. But as mentioned, to really work, we have to focus on something we want, but also not want it at the same time. We would like an ice cream cone, but we are totally fine without it. But should the cone appear, we will show great gratitude for its appearance. This not wanting has to come from a deeper place, not from the mind itself, where the modern manifestation gimmicks out there trap people. Because they are focusing only on the want, not the being okay if the want never manifests. Thus the manifesting becomes greedy, and that stops the process. I should make a short comment on the use of energy in betweenness. Anytime you put the mind under mental tension, really think on a problem, or focus on something mentally, there is an increase in body energy that can come. However, the results of that tension are not manifested until the tension subsides or explodes by its own force. Satori itself is claimed to occur as a result of the explosion or going over the top, a very traumatic result of great tension placed on the mind. Art Tickner described awakening as the moment our internal transistor finally shorts itself out. It can only short out due to energy sent there that overloads it. For most, it can come as a trauma, where the transistor is blown out in one shot, or it can happen gradually over 20 or 30 years of seeking, as happened in Art's case. While physical energy can be projected from the body and can affect the environment and even heal others, mental energy can also be projected, called transmission. Even the lesser forms of this, ESP, telepathy, astral projection, come from the use of this mental energy. This stored energy can be harnessed, as happens in extreme situations, the mother lifting the car off a son, and afterwards the body is not drained at all. Transmission involves routing this energy from physical to mental and projecting it. This part of the topic is quite a challenging one, and should you be interested in learning more about transmission, I suggest you contact one of the TAT Foundation members who spent time around Rose. I will leave you with a final clue about transmission, and that involves healing. Generally, a healer heals by projecting their own stored energy at the patient. It may look like they are giving acupuncture needles, massage, dream therapy, or counseling, but a part of the healer's energy is being put into the package, the needles or the conversation, and is going to the patient, which helps give them a boost. When done at a high level, Rose called this zapping, and in a short period of time, a few years, will wear out the healer. At a low level, it will leave the curer tired. Rose warned his students about going out to do healing work with troubled people, because there can be a great drain of one's energy from the procedure. Rose claimed that healing has to come from the individual by correcting their inner state, or by dealing with an old trauma or situation that has caused the system to become unbalanced. He is not saying to not help, just not help those who have no interest in real inner transformation, which is most everyone, or we will weaken ourselves while the patient didn't transform. A few have learned the greater healing secret of how to work with energy similar to transmission and do not project their own energy to the patient. This opens a doorway of sorts. As such, the healer never gets drained from their work, nor is the healer needing the patient to get well. They are just there in the midpoint of the tension, and from the eye interact with the hurricane. I leave that with you to ponder. There are few of those out there, but they are very rare to come across. The natives that I know who do similar things, even when it seems like they're smoking a prayer with a pipe, mixing herbs, or meeting in a sweat lodge, are not so much asking for the spirits to fix someone, but for the spirits to come to show the person what they need to do to fix themselves. The idea is give the person back their power through knowledge of self, which will lead to healing knowledge that will last a lifetime. Part of that comes not from being a healer as a business, which halts possibility, and instead to be a healer just to be a healer. This bringing money into the temple is one of modern spirituality's biggest ignored topics, saying that help and healing should be free, but then charging a big amount of money to get the so-called free help. Even the energetic exchange theory that says to get something of value you have to pay for it does not take much examination to see that it is bullshit. Anything you have of true value, you never had to pay for. To be a healer and not lose one's healing power is a challenge few take seriously. I don't believe in patching tires. I believe in removing nails from the highway. Richard Rose. Nature. I have learned more from nature than I have from books. Bernard of Clairvaux, monk connected to the Knights Templar. Now I am resting comfortably, currently up against one of the 11 massive rocks that make up an ancient stone circle. There are 3 other circles like this here, at this place. In fact, both Anders and Liv have found their own circle to sit calmly in. These terrific stone structures exist all over Scandinavia, but are mostly ignored by the local populations, who have believed the fairy tales they are told in school that these circles are Viking grave sites. Just like the misinterpretation presented about Egyptian pyramids being created for the burial of a dead king in Egypt, so too has this northern European place of power been twisted away from its original function. While there are burials in some areas around the circles, those came long after the stones were originally in use, like the burials which happened around great cathedrals. These circles were one of the human race's earliest temples. They were places to heal, balance, connect with the heavens, or to get answers. Built with giant rocks, these boulders were positioned through sacred geometry to form geometric patterns and astrological alignments. The stones themselves were also purposely shaped to allow each one to create the exact sound and frequency that the builders wanted. In short, these are some of the Earth's great power places, and amazingly, they are usually left vacant. Swedes and Norwegians spend large amounts of money to travel to England to see Stonehenge and Avebury, not realizing they have similar structures right in their own backyards. The footnote discusses Stonehenge being a dead site, but I've already discussed that in great detail in one of my earlier videos. I treat each stone circle that I find the same way I was taught to approach and interact with a native Indian medicine wheel, for essentially they are no different. Both are teaching tools of wisdom placed in circular geometric patterns that can be read and accessed if one takes the time to learn how to do so. While the stone circle I am in now could have been considered a distant place of religious or spiritual importance by the original builders, it is truthfully beyond all of those things. This is a vortex point, where the earth and sky, matter and spirit, even life and death could be bridged. Given this is a chapter about betweenness, one could say on a simple scale that sites like this stone circle create a gap in most everything. Thus, by joining the gap, we open to the magical essence of the universe. One way to tap into this essence is to learn how to merge with this force of nature. Medieval alchemists suggested that learning to appreciate nature is one of the primary tasks in this field. I was taught to never pick a flower or even take a stone without first learning how to ask if that object of nature wants to come with me. I also discovered how to leave an offering of thanks if it does. We would ask a human being if they wanted to come and visit our homes, so why should I not do the same with a rock? This concept of equaling ourselves with all aspects of nature begins a process of lessening the importance we place on the human self. By being in connection with nature, we allow our bodies and our minds to be recharged by the energy that still exists in the natural world. It is a type of energy that has nearly been destroyed in modern cities. We can potentially soak up even more in places described as power spots. It's not about worshiping nature. The natural world too answers to something. Instead, it's about learning to work with nature and not against it. The ancient tribal goal was for every member of the community to get to the enough point. It was not a climate of more for some and less for others. Tribal life did not result in habits that depleted the planet, but fostered practices that stayed in balance with it. The tribe members lived in groups where each human had a role and a responsibility. There was no need for commerce or money. People were in life together, and no one needed to make a profit of someone else. They knew that if they did not have fresh water or air, it would not matter how many riches they had acquired. This system maintained a livable planet for hundreds of thousands of years. It wasn't perfect or idyllic, but it was long-term sustainable. As Rose suggested, If people were to start to live in a balanced and interdependent way with nature, many of our own and the world's problems would be solved. We look out the window at this point and observe the world as a sorrowful slaughterhouse, a place of blood and carnage. Most people are content to remain fertilizer in the organic parade of life, while imagining cosmic importance to their daily drama. Richard Rose and John Kent. Nature, on one hand, is one of the most beautiful elements of the dream. Without question, my cat is a true Zen master. I need no other teacher, just her, stretched out beside me, wondering why I want to do anything else but stretch out with her. But nature is also something else, the side people don't want to see. People present their views on the meaning of life, yet continue to play games of make-believe without ever asking honest questions about any of it. Honesty reveals that the only thing that can be proved about the human condition, and all of nature, is that we are here to reproduce prior to death, and then we become fertilizer afterwards, either for the earth or another creature. Rose asked us to think about how many worms must die this second in order to feed all the birds in the world. And what does a worm feel when it dies? Why set up such a system? Perhaps God loves us the same way we love cattle, i.e., that we can be milked and eaten. To assume that the world exists for our education or growth or enjoyment is an ego-centered presumption that still fails to determine who is growing, experiencing, or enjoying. We all get sold a fairy tale about how wonderful this place is. However, when we look closely, all we see is a system designed to create carnage. Power. Everything we do, everything we are, rests on our personal power. If we have enough, one word uttered might be sufficient to change the course of our lives. But if we don't have enough personal power, the most magnificent piece of wisdom can be revealed to us, and that revelation won't make a damn bit of difference. Carlos Castaneda. We have been at the stones for about an hour. Anders and Liv are standing and currently walking around the one with the largest stones. I'm sitting comfortably in a small circle about 30 feet away. That is when I notice an older woman with a long walking stick come trudging out of the forest towards the large circle. She is walking a bit oddly, and I sit carefully and watch her. She stops to have a conversation with Anders and Liv. Of course, at first I figure that since they would be talking in Swedish, there's no need for me to go over and slow down the conversation. But I begin to contemplate more carefully. I have been at this set of stones 5 or 6 times, and I have only ever once seen a young couple come by for a short look, then turn around and go back to their car. This woman was different, very different. And I also began to notice that she was not someone out for a walk in the woods. She was the woods. She was power. Power spots are places on the earth that, due to their positioning, cause an intensification of energy. The earth has energy fields that turn into a gigantic magnetic grid. These fields generally run in straight lines, ley lines of the English, and where they cross each other, the main power points can be found. Plato once drew a map of the earth that showed it as a giant crystal ball comprised of diagonal pieces to show how the earth lines run. It resembled a modern soccer ball, which may be storing this information of exactly how the earth is set up. Our body mirrors this with what the Chinese call meridians. Where these meridians cross are the acupuncture points used to break up blocks, move energy, or heal various seemingly disconnected parts of the body. Power spots are the acupuncture points on the earth. Some of the big ones are easy to spot. Ancient sites like Machu Picchu or the Giza pyramids were built on them. When the Christians took over an area, they tore down the ancient sites and built their own church. Most medieval churches in Europe run in straight lines as they follow the old power layouts. Some power spots are just a simple place in nature that is completely unnoticeable until you stand or sit on it. Power spots are places where we can recharge, stop our mind, find an answer to a problem, or just relax. One of the amazing things of these places that they can push our attention into the other world of dreaming. You might say they are doorways to jump realities. Power will make special appearances for us by manifesting through what are sometimes called allies. An ally is a power that a man can bring into his life to help him, advise him, and give him the strength to perform acts, whether big or small, right or wrong. An ally is an indispensable aid to knowing. Carlos Castaneda. The problem is that there are many types of allies. Alcohol or drugs can be an ally, for it can get some to perform acts that they normally don't. So too can the words of a book, a good friend, or a non-physical being. As such, one must understand who or what we have brought into our lives as our allies, and see if they come from a space that helps us or hinders us. For many allies, such as drugs, ask a price in return for helping us. We must see if the price we are forced to pay is worth what we are getting back. When power manifests, sometimes it does so as a thing of nature. A gust of wind, an eagle that flies overhead, two deer that appear from nowhere. On the surface, it seems just like the wind, or a bird, or some deer. Yet once in a while something is different about their appearance. And sometimes power appears and manifests as people. They look just like all the other people we know, until you look more carefully. This was not the first time that this has happened to me at a stone circle, or ancient pyramid, or whatnot. I have a boatload of stories. But I always get surprised, and of course honored, when power makes another appearance. Though this time it was not for me. It was for Liv and Anders. They spoke and joked for another 5 minutes, when the woman kept on walking right to a section of trees next to the forest. I watched her from the side of my vision, to see her but not to look directly at her, and saw her, in a sense, merge with the forest. I walked over to my friends, kind of smiling. "Good chat?" I asked. "Oh yes, she was so nice and friendly. You should have come and said hi." "Nope, that manifestation was for you. She was not a person." At first, Liv just kind of looked at me with a sort of, "Are you being a jerk with us now?" kind of stare, but then replied, "Yes, there was something odd about her. But, she's a bit elderly. But come on, she's a person like you or me." "She is definitely not like you or me. That was not a person." "Okay, where did she come from?" Liv points. "Okay, and where did she leave to?" Well, I wasn't paying attention, but somewhere that direction," pointing again. "I watched her. She came right out of that area of trees, not up the path like we did. Then she disappeared, and I say disappeared, for that is my best way to describe it, into those bushes and trees, again, not up the path. Think about it. She wasn't using the path like us. She sort of just materialized from the forest, and then merged back with the forest." "Did you listen and remember to every single thing she said?" I asked. "Not really," she replied. I thought they were just people having a conversation. I'll try to remember what I heard. Is it important?" "Very. Well, for the two of you." "Well, she did say she was out for a walk, that she was the protector of this place, and that she suggested some other stones a few kilometers down the road we might like to see also." "Protector of this place? Do you really think she's a caretaker, or landscaper, or something?" "She is nature. She is this forest. She was coming out to check on us, make sure we may not be hurting this place. She obviously liked the two of you enough to come out and make contact with you. You should see it as a blessing. She just appeared and merged back with the woods after sharing a message that you should go see other stones." "So, should we go find these other stones?" "Absolutely. When we have a gift of power manifesting for us and they make a suggestion, we follow it with no questions asked. But when you get there, you two can go to the stones first. I will just follow you. At those stones, the gift is for you, and you are my guide." "So how do you know when they're people, or allies pretending to be people?" "You sort of get the hang of it with time," I answered. "The first step is to know that power is always around, and interacting with us, and can do so in various ways. And to know that not every single person, rock, or tree we see is really a rock, person, or tree. Some things are dangerous and are out to get us, negative allies, demons, while others are there to give us a message, a direction, or some help, allies, spirits. But most of the time, you are with a person, a rock, or a tree. Just by knowing it's possible, you can begin to start to tell the difference. When I look back at my experiences of meeting power and allies, when it appeared as people, on the surface, they did not seem that much different than any other human one might meet. That was until I began to ask them questions, which they never provided any specific answer. Where are they from? Around here. Where are you going? Just over the hill. Or they may do odd things that just seem out of place. Once, while on a walk with a woman in Copenhagen to help her find ways to expand her dreaming, we noticed a man walking in such a manner that can only be described as zigzagging from one sidewalk to the other. It was as if he didn't know what a road or a sidewalk was. Pretending to be a person is the best way I can describe it. And without full awareness in such situations, our mind will just go along with the perception of meeting a strange person, perhaps thinking he was drunk or somehow crazy. Thus we have to stay alert and carefully examine things our mind wants us to quickly ignore and get back to normal things. Was it just some abnormal behavior, or was it somehow a show of power just for us? There is another aspect to what is called allies. Not all are there to help us. Some are there to hinder us, and these are known as negative allies. The greatest are what are known as the archon demons, and the parasite they have given us. But there are smaller versions as well. Drugs are another example. Drugs were at times used in the past because they are a simple way to get into dreaming. The problem with drugs is that the drug has control. Thus, the drug has the power while under the influence of it. Any drug has a high demand. By that, I mean they work by inflating someone, give you what you do not seem to have in the moment. To the person taking them, the drug seems to provide them all they are missing and cannot imagine life without it. As such, the drug has tricked the person to think the only way they can gain the experience is through the drug and create a latch. Every addict I've ever talked with knows very well this idea. The drug gives you something, but demands something large as well. Until the demand becomes more than what they seem to be getting, it will be hard to break someone off any drug. Marijuana, cocaine, pharmaceutical, alcohol, the internet, sex, or food. Because one cannot believe they can be good enough without them. For some, meeting power will be calm and pleasant. Other times, it will be an experience of pure terror. One friend, Paul, on his way to hear a talk I was giving, had a man run up to his car on a busy street and try to punch his windshield. The man was dodging traffic to try and punch his car. This is this particular person's key inner block, resistance, that must be overcome and manifested as an outward challenge. We confront this kind of ally when we are ready. This is symbolized in the Matrix movie with Neo, the warrior, and Agent Smith, the special ally. And when Neo finally defeats Smith, he gets filled with an almost unimaginable power. We made it to the other stones, and it is now later in the evening. The sun was going down. It was getting a bit cooler. I put my small jacket on to stay warm. These were nice stones, but nothing felt too out of the ordinary. Anders and Liv walked around, sort of feeling that this was their special place, but nothing special was occurring. That can happen too. Following power does not necessarily mean magical occurrences. Some, of course, can be so amazing that one will classify it as a religious experience. Thinking our experience with power was over, we casually strolled back down the path to where the car was parked, not really saying anything. After brushes with power, it's always best to try and stay quiet for a few hours and let the experience integrate. It did not take long to see that this power experience was not yet over for us. Beside an outcrop of some very interesting rocks, I stopped. I thought I saw fog roll by from right to left, but it was at night when there should be no fog. I looked again and again saw the fog, or like a puff of smoke, appear and then move. I pointed this to Anders and Liv, and we both stood there for about 10 minutes, watching the fog smoke appear and then disappear. At the same time, a small light, like a burst, would occur in the middle of the patch of fog. I noticed that the fog patches always seemed to be over 2 spots. I walked to the first one and stood on it, and Liv later did the same. We both felt warm, as if our back had an energy current. On the second spot, my feet felt like they were on fire, and electricity shooting up my legs. But just one step over and there was nothing, just regular ground. Then the fog stopped. Our experience ended, and our bodies were now full of energy. We walked back and saw no more fog or power. We had had our share for one day. John Kent once recalled that a student asked Rose, "Is it true that everything is already perfect, including the course of our paths? Only our understanding or perspective of it is wrong?" Rose replied, "Now you're starting to get the idea." A major step, though not enlightenment itself, is seeing that something other than the individual me is in control. Not some benevolent deity or angry force, but rather just what is, operating as it always has. And we are like actors on Shakespeare's stage, playing our roles. The more we see this, the more we start to step out of the way and let betweenness operate. This letting go or surrender is not something we can do. We do not surrender as a way of getting something, for that is still an egoic action. Surrender comes from a total acceptance of what is. In other words, it arrives naturally when we realize that we do not have control over everything that we believed. All of our struggling, no matter what path we walk, is really just our own personal way of trying to comfort ourselves as we surrender. And ultimately, that surrender is to know fully that we are a mortal being and that we will die. We are all dying. That is really what life is, the drawn-out process of dying. That is why awakening is not about happiness or bliss. Instead, it will come via trauma and chaos, which by default places us before the inevitability of death. Ancient cultures place seeking the knowledge of death as the utmost priority. That is why everyone must have their own individual path. That is because, as Rose claimed, the type of trauma we each need to finally get a look at ourselves will be unique for each of us. But we do not need to do anything to try and create trauma. We certainly don't need to go looking for suffering. If we are serious about looking for truth, the chaos is going to find us. We simply need to start being aware of this fact. And while always being committed to finding ultimate answers, we must view life through the eyes of betweenness. We don't have time for anything. Death is just around the corner. It is a race to know who you are before who you don't know dies. This has to become your number one priority. Richard Rowe's lecture. Since this is such a challenging topic, and one almost impossible to fully understand, I will add a few more quotes on the subject taken from Rose and compiled by longtime student Paul Constant. Maybe something in the quotes will trigger an understanding of what is meant surrounding this very all-encompassing topic. You don't want it, so you don't know if it's going to happen. So when it happens, you haven't done it. It simply happened. And if it doesn't happen, so what? It was one of those things that you couldn't change anyway. So you accept it with serenity. Yes, I believe this. I would like it to happen. But I'm not going to try to make it happen unless it's supposed to. Then it will happen. Otherwise, I will forget about it. Look between the thoughts, in the gap. To announce your intentions invites opposition. If a person goes around talking to everyone about his intentions, it is like blowing the horns. To keep silent is the key. No effort is wasted. All we can do is our best. You will succeed somehow if you keep doing your best. Every time that something is done in a certain mood, selflessly, it lights a light that keeps things moving in that direction. How do we do it? Awaken? We do it by carrying water on both shoulders, but not allowing it to touch either shoulder. We stagger soberly between the blades of the gauntlet with recklessness and conviction, but we pick our way through the tulips with fear and trepidation because the trap of the ladder is sweet. We charge the gates of heaven by urinating our way through hell, and all the while sitting for 40 years on the banks of the Ganges doing nothing. We sit on the banks of the Ganges not from laziness, but from an anger at angriness, a fury against our inner fury for wasted activity. And we pull back a terrible arrow, but never let it go. And by so holding, with the universe as our target, the universe is filled with terror at our threat. When I finished chapter 6, a small piece had been left out. I will finish it here. This is on page 175 if you're following in the book. The Absolute. For all things must be one, if they are indeed one. Yes, they are one, and they shall never cease being one, in order that the fullness may not be destroyed. Corpus Hermeticum, 16:3. My me is God, nor do I recognize any other me, except God himself. St. Catherine of Genoa. Whenever someone finally has the courage to take their first look inside, expecting to find something, all they really find, if they are honest, is an empty hole. This hole is not empty, but rather it is the emptiness of reality. That is scary for the newly created ego, especially when looking outward at what appears to be other solid, real people. It feels it must keep doing things to be like all the others. It makes a mask, pretending to be solid and whole like the rest. The ego is made primarily to try and fill that hole, which gets covered over and left unexamined any further. The appearance of separation is the root of the ego. Ego forms from the foundational idea that I am a separate being, different and unique from all other manifested beings. However, one of the elements found upon awakening is that there actually is only one thing, one mind, one source. Even a glimpse of this truth is enough to cause confusion for a long time in a world where duality reigns. A primary New Age idea is that we are one, and is used as a rallying cry to always be nice to one another. Yet how can there possibly be a we in one? There is only one. For a we, there must be a me over here, and something else over there that I can define as a we. That means two. All modern religions and the New Age community speak of how all is one, or God is everywhere. Somehow it seems they seem unable to allow this to include God in the murderer, or God in the homosexual. One means everything, not select things, or more to the point, just things you like. If anything is excluded from the absolute, then you're not talking about one. To have any experience, you also need two, an experiencer and something to experience. That is why you must be careful with an experience of unity, or any mystical states, because by default, they are experience-based. Unity, or a mystical state, like any experience, will come and go. There is a before and after. You may be in unity for a while, but eventually duality comes back, because there is still a you experiencing this unity. The absolute cannot be experienced. When encountering the absolute, the mind will go blank, for it cannot operate without separation. Some compare it to deep sleep, where there is no experience, but existence continues. This is not accurate, of course, but a pointer. It does not mean that the absolute is blackness, as commonly suggested. Rather, it only means that our ego mind cannot experience it. When a deeper glimpse of the absolute comes through, it is not the joy or bliss that people expect, as in the experience of cosmic consciousness. To actually view no self, the realization that the personality and mind is a fictional impostor is shocking, to say the very least. It is the peeling off of every layer of the onion, only to see that there is nothing at the core. Emptiness shows that all we believe we are, we aren't, and that all we believe we own, we don't. Holding on will just make the emptying process more painful. Ego believes that it is in a constant battle, the general of an army no less. And like any general, its existence depends upon having to fight a war. Thus it continually tries to create conflict. This general is very strategic, and will even make concessions to keep its strength. It gives up Area A only to fortify Areas B and C. It looks like you've made advances in one place, but ego simply strengthens its key strongholds elsewhere. The belief is that ego is overcome by killing it. This is not accurate, although it appears throughout the process as if you are killing it. It is spoken of and referred to in that murderous fashion for you to gain a real contempt for it. But the way you eventually kill ego is to stop fighting the war. We remove all of the soldiers from the battlefield who no longer want to fight an enemy. As a result, the general has no one to command. With separateness gone, i.e. when there is no other, then there is nothing to gain, lose, or protect. Ego stops when it sees that it has no job anymore. It can still go on pretending it's a general in a war room, making its commands. However, Since there are no longer any troops to follow its wishes, no actions come from its dictates. Every lie, mask, or layer you drop is like another battalion of soldiers taken from the field of battle. Ego's only real fear is not that it will be killed, but that it will be out of a job. So let it keep its job. Take away all the workers. Let it become the general of nobody. The best weapon we have against this force we are calling ego is to observe it, and then to allow something that might be called our center, or our core, to turn away from all that ego suggests. The other great weapon against this parasite is laughter, humor. Recognizing the absurdity in oneself, and being able to laugh at the part of oneself that's being ridiculous, weakens mind's hold and allows us to ignore its suggestions. Please don't mistake this removal of the workers or soldiers as easy, or think it is not a challenge because the idea of surrender is involved. The surrender takes everything you have. A part of our mind will do everything it could to prevent us from fulfilling our task, finding the totality of the self. This could include pushing one into loss of meaning, melancholy, and even suicidal depression. The countermeasure is to persist, in spite of all the disappointments. Carlos Castaneda. Hence a big part of the reason I wrote this book, to show that the process of discovering or realizing who we are does not in any way look like a nice spiritual journey. Most every modern spiritual book is going to have to be discarded if there's going to be any progress at all. Because the progress is not to make ourselves better, it's to dismantle ourselves and see if anything we thought of as me is real. Answering who I am is probably the most difficult task in our lives. This single question threatens to negate all that we are, all that we have, all that we know. Thus, as a result, one encounters tremendous resistance to inquiry on all levels. This can manifest as the procrastination and distractions inherent in what we call normal living. Some may ask, what is the point of all the work if the goal is totality of the self? Especially when there's no guarantee that our challenging work will even create this completion or be met with any level of success. Yet we can transform our experience and perception even without awakening. This is evidenced to me primarily through personal correspondence with some of Rose's students from the 1980s and 90s. Within their responses to me is a clarity, selflessness, and friendliness that they likely did not have when they made their first treks to Rose's farm in the 1980s. Something transformed, and that something is evident even in an email. If you do this observing at a deep level, it is likely that awareness will get pushed from your normal mode of perception. You will move from the belief experience that the body-mind is who you are, and instead begin to see this body thing as a character in a movie or play. Awakening is to identify with the actor or the dreamer, and not the role of the dreamed. To say it another way, to believe that the you that is seen in the mirror as you is defined as being asleep. To start to get the sense the thing you have always believed yourself to be may in fact be a shadow of a much more true self is the beginning of awakening. To start to view our thoughts and feelings and actions simply as the experiences of an actor. This is not a call to be in the present moment or a plea to live as a witness in order to live happy or end suffering. It is simply to be aware of what the character is doing and thinking, from the viewpoint of the actor playing the role of you. Arjuna and Donnie Darko represent the average asleep person who forgot they are a character. Meanwhile, Krishna and Frank are ultimate awareness, reminding the characters that reality is simply a movie and that they have a role to play. The enemies of hatred, attachment, and so forth do not have arms and legs, nor do they have courage and skill. So how do they make me their slave? Shanti Diva. Rose and Castaneda both use the terms of the Hopi Navajo, that of being a channel or tube. This tube is connected to the manifesting source by a link or a cord. This almost makes a workable analogy of humans as a television set, a hollow tube attached by a cable cord to the picture source. What we see on the screen is not the source, but a created image sent through the cord. The screen is mistaken as reality. The Hopi claim that our link gets filled with the garbage of ego, ignorance, identification, laziness, lust, and greed, all of which cause distortions to what is sent through the connecting cord and perceived on the screen. This obstruction of the channel is what prevents human beings from realizing their true nature, and even muffles intuition that would alert one to the falseness of mundane existence and guide one home. Richard Rose. When this channel is cleared through a shift in the point of reference, from a lesser I me to a larger I self then occurs. Self is seeing through an ego, no longer with an ego. To take the first steps at attempting this shift, we turn the mind on itself. We turn our curiosity from all the shiny objects of reality to become curious as to who or what is perceiving them and why. We move the energy that normally goes to our desires, funneling it instead to the desire to find our essence. We turn our deep needs and wants for connection and friendship into appreciation for our coworkers on the path. Most things in this world, as long as the inner parts are hidden, stand upright and live. If they are revealed, they die. So with a plant. If the root is exposed, the plant dries up. Nag Hammadi Codex, Gospel of Philip. Ego in all of its many forms and variations must be examined under the microscope of your awareness. People will look at everything except their deep-seated beliefs, hopes, and dreams. Find them all, root them out. Someone can meditate for hours, stop eating meat, and quit having sex for the rest of their life. But as long as they do not look at their own mind, nothing will really change. Shine a light on the hidden, and it is hidden no longer. One final reminder. Is Rose claim that it is foolish or even dangerous to try to abandon all of our egos at once, with the mistaken belief that some sort of instant salvation awaits? Just move away from untruth, the most obvious and harmful egos first, until gradually we continue to let go, even of the finest layers. The ego of belief in self, survival, and desire for wholeness needs to stay for a while to help get rid of the other egos, such as laziness, weakness, lust, and conceit. The shift towards absolute awareness should be gradual, yet the final crossing of the line potentially comes about in a shocking and traumatic way. We have no control of the final moment. Instead, we work hard to physically and mentally be in a place where we can handle what could be a stark scenario should that particular lightning bolt hit us. Thus, proper self-observation has given us the vaccination that we require for reaching the absolute. Thank you for listening to this chapter. We have 2 chapters remaining in the reading of Falling for Truth. Thank you.